Usually that stops everybody. Clearly, I've gotten better at that song. And if you're in the afternoon panelists, if you're one of the afternoon panelists, if you could come ahead and sit up here from the get-go. Hi, how are you? Hi, Larry. It's so nice to meet you. Donna Lipscomb. Okay. I'm going to start singing Taylor Swift if we don't get in here. Nobody wants to hear that. Shake it up, shake it up. Hi, Jean. How are you? Thank you. I'm not, but see, not everybody's listening. I might be before the... Although, usually what happens is I remember that they're taping, and I'm like, nobody wants to hear that.
Are they taping one?
I think it's what it is it's, I don't know whether it just stops or not. They've not been able to? I'll ask them about that because I know that the polls just didn't work for the first question, but all the other polls, as you've heard, they've given us responses.
Well, the one lady thought it was just that only certain people were being asked to respond because she's just, that was her texting.
Yeah, no, I think if you've logged in, you can. I'll ask. Right, so they should be able to. I'll ask Brett real quick, or if you could go and just make sure you sit down, but Brett should be asking. Yeah.
Sorry. Fair enough. I know, I got you.
Yeah, it's right here.
I thought you were going to put on a mask.
Oh, no.
So I answered your question. I wanted to talk about the thing that takes it as an order.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming back so quickly. I understand that rumors of my singing in here was what got everybody back and to say to everyone who had heard the first part. So, thank you. Chris? I want to welcome everybody back this afternoon. It looks like everyone at least got lunch. I didn't see anybody looking forlorn out there, so I'm glad that everyone had that opportunity. I think we had a really good conversation this morning, and we're really looking forward to this afternoon. I want to remind everybody again that this proceeding is being recorded and transcribed, both of which will later be posted on our webpage, which is a page that if someone Googles, they could find this information. And we also have a few new panelists at the table, and we're going to let them, for the FDA side, we're going to let them introduce themselves. start at that end.
Okay. Yes, hi, I'm Larry Bauer. I'm a regulatory scientist in the Office of New Drugs Rare Diseases Program. This morning, Jonathan Goldsmith was here, and Jonathan and I worked together. And I just wanted to say thank you to all. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here. I saw an old friend, John Walsh, and I said it's just so great to see, because I know people are at different places on the spectrum in their ability to travel. And it was really great to hear all of the stories this morning and the experiences. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Witten. I'm a senior clinical reviewer from the Office of Cellular Tissue and Gene Therapy.
Hi, I'm Ruby Mehta from CEDAR, Division of Gastroenterology and Inborn Error of Metabolism.
Okay, I think that's our new staff. I want to welcome everyone who's going to talk about our afternoon talk. Can you hit the next button? We have Jean, Karen, Ken, Marcy, Fred, and Jesse, and I really want to thank them for their willingness to participate. The questions in this topic really are their perspectives on approaches to treatment. And they're going to answer what they're currently doing to treat the condition, how those conditions are working, treatments are working, talk about advantages and disadvantages. Again, they each have about 5 minutes to speak, and I'll be monitoring that. I really look forward to our conversation. And so I'm going to ask that Jean, if you don't mind.
My name is Jean McCathern. I'm lung affected and might be liver affected depending on which doctor you trust. Currently, I'm on inhalers like most other lung affected alphas, but unlike a lot of people, I'm on an inhaled augmentation therapy as part of a trial. Once that's done, I'll go back to the regular IV augmentation. And one of the other things I consider a treatment is I did complete pulmonary rehab very early when I was first diagnosed, and I think that's helped a lot. The treatments, as far as the inhalers, I know they work because I tried stopping it, and about a week later I couldn't breathe. So I know they work. I've been on augmentation therapy for 11 years, and my FEV1 hasn't declined at all. And I didn't have some of the other tests with diffusing capacity, but since I've had those tests, they go up and down, but they're in the same area. So I'm very happy with the augmentation therapy. However, augmentation therapy does complicate your life. I have grandchildren and a daughter, and they live in Arizona, and I normally live in Pennsylvania. And in order to go to Arizona and continue my treatments, I have to have a doctor that's licensed in that state. It's not just any doctor. It has to be someone licensed in the state, or the nurses won't infuse me. And since they have enough trouble getting my veins, I don't think I could do it myself. So that does complicate things, especially since my insurance says I really can only have emergency treatment outside of my home area. With the inhaled therapy, I don't have that problem. However, with inhaled therapy, the trial ends in October, and I don't think they're going to let me keep on with it, unfortunately. The inhalers don't complicate my life anymore. But I will tell you, when I was first diagnosed with alpha-1, I was on steroids, and inhaled steroids. And I'd been on inhaled steroids because back in 1980, I was diagnosed with asthma. And so as soon as they were available, and which was about 10 years in, right around 1990, because I was in a trial for budesonide, which is an inhaled steroid, they told me at the time, you won't have any long-term effects. And I found out myself, before they even admitted it, that you can. So I got off those as quickly as possible by advocating for myself and asking the doctors to reduce the amounts of steroids until I finally got off of them this past January. I had osteopenia because steroids do cause bone loss. So, that is a real disadvantage of some is sort of like a miracle drug, but it has all these little side effects. Over time, my treatments really changed. When I was first diagnosed with asthma, I was on the same things, equivalent to the same things that I'm on today. However, back then you took pills, they didn't work. I'd have to sit up in bed to breathe at night. I was in the Air Force for 25 years, and I didn't want them to know what was going on for a long time, so I really, really had to work at hiding my symptoms. And, but then, actually the first breakthrough for me was that budesonide trial. Then I could breathe again. And I didn't have the problems I had all throughout the others. So I've seen so many advances for the symptoms that people with normal emphysema or asthma have. But since I've been diagnosed, and I was diagnosed in 2004, there hasn't been really any advances in augmentation therapy other than maybe some purification, more availability, which is important. But that's not what I call an advance. I'd call an advance another step. Something that would stop liver and lung disease would be great, especially if you could use it in children, and especially if you could test children right when they're born to find out if they have that problem without having to worry about genetic discrimination, because for life insurance and long-term care insurance. I know you don't think about that as a baby when you have babies, but if you're susceptible to this, you want to be able to get life insurance and long-term care insurance along the way. The things that aren't improved is I still have emphysema. I still have some fibrosis, or maybe no fibrosis, depending on which liver biopsy you believe. And it was the some fibrosis that came before the no fibrosis, which is kind of odd. So that there's no treatment to improve that. So my treatment, if I had one, it would be one time as a baby, and for all of us that have liver and lung disease, something that can cure that as well. And then I'd be happy. So, but unfortunately I don't have a magic wand, but I think some people in this room have a lot of influence in those areas, and I hope that this helps them decide to make some more headway.
Thank you so much, Jean. We appreciate it. Karen?
Thank you very much for the invite to be here. It's an important day for our community, and amazing that it's happening with such a full house. So I am Karen Erickson, and I am a daughter and a sister and an aunt and a niece. I love to hike. I'm a career professional in biotechnology. I do dog rescue. I do not-for-profit fundraising and awareness. And 15 years ago, my identity changed to being an Alpha-1 patient. And over that 15 years, I progressed to the point that I needed a lung transplant and did finally receive that. But that progression and that path took away everything I ever identified myself with. And I'm just now building that back. The first thing that needs to happen in any good treatment plan is getting diagnosed. My diagnosis took a lot less time than many people in this room, but it was riddled with misdiagnosis, and they seemed to be very situational. I was a big triathlete, and when I went and presented with breathlessness at an urgent care and in my workout clothes, it was exercise-induced asthma. When I went as a career professional to test for a device that I needed to use with a very dangerous substance as I worked in hemostasis and blood clotting arena, I was tested for a respirator. I failed miserably. I was told to come back 2 weeks later. I failed miserably again. And rather than test me further, they decided that the machine was malfunctioning and sent that out for testing. When I was in Vegas with some friends, and I may be a bit of a goof, but I'm fairly straight-laced, I presented in the hospital with breathlessness. And rather than run any vitals, they proceeded to question me on drug use and what I had done that night that would cause that. When I was finally diagnosed, I was already at a lung function of 38%. My doctor was a wonderful man and put me on augmentation therapy straight away. But he also put me on augmentation therapy when I was dosing at every month. And so after a year of that, when I did my next test, I was already tested at 30%. And I had lost a lot of function and was then put on weekly augmentation therapy. And over the course of the decade that followed, I stayed as fit as I could be. I was compliant. All my inhalers, augmentation therapy. But when you would catch something, I mean, I worked in an organization with 10,000 people. You catch something, you'd be hospitalized, and you'd get just a tick lower, and just a tick lower, and just a tick lower. And when I hit 20% lung function a decade later, I put myself on a transplant list. But I also put myself on a higher dose of augmentation therapy. And amazingly, at 20%, I stayed there until for 3 years. I did not budge. So that dosing was important for me. I think my most vital therapy came in the form of community engagement and that participation and support that I received from all of you that are sitting here today. And I don't think that understatement or that engagement can be understated. I think it's vital. I think we saw it in the numbers of hospitalization we have. That peer-to-peer contact is working. I participated in as much research as I could. But I was already very low when I came into this community. That's when I was at 30%, and I was disqualified from many trials. I did what I could. I've had my biopsies. I filled out the surveys. But again, it was pretty limited, and so I decided that I could do the most good by putting myself at the table. I wanted to be part of the decision making. I wanted to be part of the review. I wanted to talk to people about how they were designing their trials and what we needed as a patient community. So that mandate that made my participation in research seem passive was very active to me. I had the experience I had from the research that I did participate in. I had my background in biotechnology. Most importantly, I had found what was this family that I couldn't possibly see progressing to 20% and being on full-time oxygen and losing their job and losing their identity to this disease. So I did, on the behalf of patients that are all here today and online and aren't with us and aren't diagnosed, and the so many that we've missed, because they've lost their battle with Alpha-1, I sat at that table, lending my voice to trial design and what a patient would and would not do and should not do was important to me, and that was my therapy. We're not in a position to stop effective therapy to be in a trial, and we're not poised to compromise the other organ impacted by this disease to be in a trial. You know, I was willing and able to do the biopsies when they made sense, but I'm not willing and able, and I couldn't ask anyone that I care so deeply about to do bronchoscopies and liver biopsies in excess. There's got to be a way around that in designing trials. For treatment opportunities, I take the perspective that the Alpha-1 community is prime for both personalized and precision medicine. I saw it with me. The interval didn't work, I dropped my function. The dose didn't work, I dropped my function. We need to find people before their function falls, before their liver disease raises, and we need to make sure that we're dosing them appropriately. And precision medicine, we're sitting on potential biomarkers that not only make some of these invasive measures very difficult, but how easy would it be to know where we're at in our augmentation therapy, what we're using, where our liver disease is, so we can treat at the moment. We don't sit with our levels the same at baseline when we have exacerbations, or maybe it's activity. We don't know, but let's measure that. And most importantly as well, it's not just the non-invasive, but it's listening to the patient. It's that patient-reported outcome. Clinical and diagnostic is important, but you're working with a person who knows their body better than anyone else, who for the first time has had 0 hospitalizations. Some out of fear, but most out of being very proactive and educated. That is therapy. So while I'm extremely grateful for the therapies that I have, weekly infusions did limit me. Another complexity and difficult manage the impact of Alpha-1s. It was tough. Delivery of these medicines could be more friendly. They could take time into account. I couldn't even shower and get out of bed, rushing around trying to get an infusion, or take nurses who were a little late. Didn't work for my energy level. I'd also be remiss if I did not strongly discount the perception that transplant, the final option for both Alpha-1 lung and liver disease, is curative. It's not. I'm forever grateful to my wonderful donor and their family for the extra time that I've been provided and the opportunities like this that it's going to allow me. Time with my family, working with this community is a blessing, but a transplant's not lasting, and it's not simple. It's life-encompassing to maintain, and it certainly won't prevent me traveling down that road of progressive disease with Alpha-1 or rejection and losing my identity again. And even more importantly, there's no transplant or current treatments that is going to allow my family and my friends to be that. I will again turn them into caregivers, and that saddens me and shouldn't happen. And they will eventually watch me pass from Alpha-1, but it won't be before we put in a hell of a lot of effort to find this cure for this disease. So again, thank you for giving me this opportunity today, and let it be an open door. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen. We appreciate it. Ken?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ken Richmond. I live in Arlington, Virginia. I'd like to thank Karen and Jean, all the other panel members who spoke earlier today. I'd like to thank the FDA for the opportunity to share my story here with you. I've been asked to speak on this topic number 2, which is perspectives on current treatment, current approaches to treatment. My Alpha-1 journey, started at age 35 when I was diagnosed by my primary care physician. After about 3 years of chronic bronchitis and trips to visit his office, I finally threw the lawyer card down and said, if you don't test me, I'm going to have my lawyer call you. He called me 3 weeks later and said, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is, yes, you are Alpha-1 deficient. The good news is I'm leaving the practice. So I went to the next thing I could do is some research, and I found that the National Institutes of Health was offering some help in this matter. And so I visited the NIH and got some verification, found my serum levels. And I heard the words that were probably the most important set of words I could take at that time. I was told that whenever possible to not give into that take it easy mentality, that common advice that for diseased folks with diseased lungs had received for so long. Don't take it easy. Push, push, push. You know, I can't say I've been successful in that, because I haven't. I'm imperfect, I'm flawed, but, you know, I try. And over the years, what I've noticed is that I've heard from other speakers today and other folks talking about depression and the effects of the disease, the alpha-1 deficiency causes, and you know, it's hit me as well. And you know, I'm happy to say that right now I'm out of that phase. I'm here. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor. My current treatment plan includes weekly intravenous augmentation therapy, daily use of long-acting bronchodilators, inhaled and nasal corticosteroids, nebulizer solutions, over-the-counter products to relieve congestion in my sinuses and in my lungs. Several times each year, right around spring and fall, shocking, I have prolonged exacerbations leading to antibiotics and prednisone. Another part of my treatment plan is exercise. It's been inconsistent, but I've been doing pretty well this year. I walk briskly, 25, 30 minutes, a couple times a day, a couple times a week, as well as doing weight-bearing exercises. And through a combination of diet and exercise this year, I've lost 30 pounds so far, and thank you. And that helps my reactive airway disease as well as reduce possible other comorbidities. You know, it's really hard for me to gauge myself on how my current treatments are working. So I reached out and asked some family members and some coworkers and some friends what their vision, what they see me, what their experience is. And to a person, they all said the same thing, that in the last 6 months, I've had fewer coughing episodes than previous. And in years prior, my reactive airways just seemed out of control. So I think whatever I'm doing seems to be working. I don't know. Regarding some disadvantages or complications, you know, I've been infusing now 17 years. And to say it's been disruptive to my work schedule is just about the biggest understatement possible. My infusion from beginning to end, where I get in my car to drive there and get back out of my car to finish up, is about 3 hours, and that's reduced as a result of purification of product. That takes a pretty hefty time out of slice out of my day. I've been fortunate. By the way, shout out to the nurses at Kaiser. I love you. They're on the webinar today. You know, we had nurses come to open the doors at 6:30 in the morning of their center, so me and 2 other alphas could infuse before our work days began. And we did that for 2 years until the administration said that wasn't going to be possible. You know, but you know, we do what we have to do to get the treatment we need. You know, another complication for me, as I mentioned, I've been taking corticosteroids for some time, and I have to take some fairly drastic measures to rid myself of a nasty case of thrush, and it's really kind of awkward. So I'm happy to share that. So my ongoing care plan, you know, I'm lucky in that since 1995, I've had several changes in my providers of care. And I've noticed that my initial pulmonologist, who was an older gentleman, love him, great guy, I taught him a lot. He retired. And my current pulmonologist, young guy, on the ball, Dr. Nguyen, how you doing? Good to see you. He's on the webinar also. You know, he's on the ball. He's up to date with research. He's willing to hear what I have to say and provide me additional care as he sees. Things like, Ken, if you lost 30 pounds, you probably would breathe better. You know, so I need that kind of work. he rotates my products to help me not, have them work most effectively. Sometimes there's some reimbursement issues. That's a problem, but we always find a way around. And just in the last year, I changed. I have very reactive airways, and so I did change my asthma medication to a higher level, and I think that's made a big difference for me. Just I don't cough as much. I do cough so much that I did buy stock in Ricola, and if anybody would like some, I bring them with me. Medication's great, and what we do on a daily basis keeps us at stasis sometimes. But, for me, I started at 98%. I'm now down to 30%. And I'm no longer the athletic person I once was. I was a multi-sport athlete. I did a lot of stuff. And, over the years, I stopped playing competitive tennis at age 40. I stopped playing competitive baseball at 47. I stopped walking hills with a pack going hunting at 52. These are things that are part of my identity, things that I won't get back. On the other hand, golf's looking pretty good for me. Other opportunities arise. I do see this as the one door closing but two more opening up. And I'm optimistic that as long as I engage myself in the process, there'll be more for me out there. As we heard from Ms. Garcia from Miami and Marvin from South Carolina, one of the most difficult things for me to handle is during times of intimacy. It's really hard to be in the moment when you're wheezing. I just can't do it, Arrangements have to be made. In this next section, it asks about what treatment has had the most positive impact on my life. And it's really not even, it's hands down for me. It's the participation and the knowledge that I've gained as a result of my disease. When I first went to the NIH and I found more about the disease, I asked about solutions. And I was told, hey, we've got a clinical trial coming up. And so I said, I'm in. They handed me the consent forms, and they were 3 or 4 pages long, and I signed it without looking at it. Now, I reread one of those recently. Interesting. Superbugs kind of freak me out. I think I've had 7 bronchoscopies. I may exaggerate, so it could only be 5. But what I found is that, for me, that participation early on in the clinical setting taught me about how to live my life today, not 20 years ago, but today. I knew nothing then, but I learned how to live as a person with 30% lung function. I was introduced to the Alpha family, you guys. We're from different places, but we share this common thing. And I see it as hope. I see that we're all coming together to try and get this cure going on because, the Band-Aid doesn't work. The Band-Aid just wears out. And, I attended my first national education conference in Framingham, Massachusetts, and as many of those attendees remember, the flu that followed was a lot of fun. But, over the hours we spent talking at the bar, I'm not sure about alphas and bars, but that's another thing. I really understand how the disease works differently in areas of my life and how I can manage them differently. Knowing that there's people from all over the early internet web groups, Paul Marks and whatnot, Claude Burrell, that was hope when you didn't have somebody you could reach out to and talk to. You could, how you doing? And those groups still exist in a different form, but we have such mass media today, we're available more than ever. My relationship with my infusion nurses, 17 years later, they're like my dear friends. I'm not so happy when they stick me, but, I know at the end of the day, it's all for my good, and, they want nothing but my best interest. You know, a question about the ideal treatment plan, and you know, I don't know. I'm not a visionary, but to me, the possibility could be real simple. If we could get to a state of gene therapy or gene modification, make that misfolding thing stop, just let it flush through. Maybe then my lungs will get the needed protease inhibitor. You know, maybe. You know, maybe just simple things like telehealth. Maybe I don't need to go to my doctor, drive half hour, be in his sick waiting room. You know, maybe I can just Skype him and say, "Doc, gotcha." You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be hard. There's a lot of science involved in some of it, but it doesn't have to be hard. Regarding clinical trials, my thoughts have changed over the years. You know, I really feel that the value of coming off infusion therapy is really important for me today. In addition, duration of the trials, number and type of procedures, you know, location. These are all important factors. And I do firmly believe clinical trials are in my future again. I think the foundation has done a great job with promoting those, and AlphaNet and our sponsors. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. Marcy?
Hi, I'm Marcy, and I would like to personally thank you for inviting me to speak on my son's behalf just less than a week after what it would have been his 13th birthday. I have a very different perspective than most, as my son is not a success story for Alpha-1. Hunter passed away at 6.5 months after receiving a liver transplant. I would like to start from the beginning of his little life so you can understand more why a cure is so desperately needed. Hunter is our 5th child, and when he was born, he had no jaundice and was perfectly healthy. When he was several weeks old, I would question the color of his eyes because the corners appeared yellow at times. I took him to the doctor on call, and he said that sometimes their livers take time to kick in, but that didn't make sense because up to that point, he was healthy. We saw his doctor the next week, and she was very concerned with the jaundice and did blood work to check his liver functions. They came back elevated, and she sent us on to a pediatric gastroenterologist. Hunter had a week of intense testing, and when the diagnosis of Alpha-1 came back on December 12, 2002, we were in shock as he told us there is no cure and that transplant's the only option. He went on to explain that only 10% of infants will be diagnosed, and of those, only 5% will need a transplant. He also said that they had no pamphlets for us on Alpha-1, but to research the internet. He felt that there would be a cure in Hunter's lifetime, but due to his age, he wanted him with a liver team. He gave him vitamins and stressed the importance of keeping him healthy so his liver doesn't work so hard. We met with the liver team the end of January and were given hope. Dr. Carpin explained in more detail what Alpha-1 is, and by then, we had time to go do our own research. The Alpha-1 community reached out to us, embraced us, and they were able to explain and support and help us accept what Alpha-1 is. We were extremely concerned with the transplant, but Dr. Carpin did more tests and reassured us that he was doing good, and just to continue medication, have weekly checkups with our pediatrician. We were doing all they asked of us, but by late February, things began to change. Hunter's stomach was getting very large, but his arms and legs were becoming tiny. Our doctor sent us back to Dr. Carpin immediately, as she said that he was gaining weight due to fluid buildup in his abdomen due to the liver beginning to fail. We saw Dr. Carpin on March 5th, and he was very concerned, started him on a diuretic, gave him more vitamins, changed his formula once again in hopes that fluid would get better. He sent us home with a new plan, but they called us each and every day to check on him. The next week, he admitted Hunter to Texas Children's Hospital to start IV treatments in hopes to remove the fluid. Hunter was listed for transplant on March 19, 2003. On April 3rd, Hunter received the transplant. We were so thankful for a new beginning for our son, but it was short-lived. The next day, they took him in for another surgery because his labs were not looking good. It turned out there was a blood clot on the portal vein, and this had caused the transplanted liver to fail. Hunter fought so hard the next few days and had yet another surgery, his third in 5 days. They received notice there was another liver, but Hunter didn't make it. On April 8, 2003, at 3:41 p.m., Hunter was in our arms as he slipped peacefully away, as he lost his fight with Alpha-1. Hunter went through a lot in his short 6.5 months. The hardest aspect of the diagnosis was that there was literally nothing to offer him. Our thoughts over and over were, how can we live in this day and not have some sort of treatment to give? How can a transplant be the only offer to fix this? How can it be that the best hope is him to not get sick and stay on vitamins? How well did the treatments work? In Hunter's case, the treatments didn't work. He continued to get sicker as his liver failed. By the time he got to transplant, he was on 13 medications twice a day. What are the most significant disadvantages or complications of current treatment, and how do they affect daily life? Personally, I think the biggest disadvantage is that there is no cure and very little treatment. How did treatment change over time? They used every treatment available at the time, and in a matter of weeks, Hunter continued to get worse. Nothing they tried worked for him. What treatment had the most positive impact on your life? The liver transplant had the most impact. His jaundice was gone almost immediately, and for the first time in 5 months, my son's eyes were white again. What would the ideal treatment look like? Ultimately, a cure or a treatment that will help strengthen the body to prepare for transplant. Participating in clinical trials, I know without a doubt if Hunter was here, he would participate. I would hope that his life would be helpful to making someone want to research and bring a cure to this. In closing, I would like to say that I have 4 surviving children who are all MCs, and I do get their liver functions checked yearly. I feel that early intervention and education is what is needed most. We try to stay healthy and do all the right things, as Hunter's short life taught us so much. We reached out to doctors immediately. We did all the things the doctors asked. We received the best medical care for our son. But in the end, he lost his battle. We had no first with him, no crawling, no walking, no birthdays because of alpha-1. My hope is that if there is even the slightest chance that a cure can be found, that you take every advantage and do so. I know Hunter was an extreme case, and the doctors will never understand why it affected him so quickly and so hard. But through research and dedication, treatment and a cure will give so many others a chance at life that my son never got. Thank you for your time, and I hope my son's story will help you understand the desperate need for a cure for alpha-1 liver disease.
Marcy, thank you so much. Thank you. Fred?
My name is Fred Walsh. I was diagnosed 25 years ago, and at that point I had 2 children, 2 small children, trying to chase them around and having more and more difficulty doing so. And life changed almost immediately, although as this condition, it is a gradual thing, a long-term condition. That you go through many changes along the way, which demands different and varying methods of treatment. One thing that I hear a lot about, and I was just going to hit on, was the costs. The costs involved with being diagnosed with alpha-1. Costs financially, the cost of expectations having to be modified or never fully realized. The cost of one's quality of life and changes that have to be made in order to adapt. And the cost of a shortened life, of a life never fully realized. So looking at each one of those, financially, we know there's heavy costs with being diagnosed with alpha-1. The therapy is increased 300% in 20 years. Inhalers. As you all know, an inhaler can be a $30 copay, or it can be a $90 copay, or $120 copay, depending upon what tier you're on. If a drug is is on that plan's formulary, if it's brand name. And the one thing that irks me the most about all these, one drug in particular, the rescue inhaler. You got a rescue inhaler that's just brand name. I can't believe that they wouldn't force, that there isn't a generic available, because it's the one medicine we all benefit from. Every one of it. But they call it a rescue inhaler. And yet we're paying $30 for a copay for it. I find it really I'm embarrassed that we don't have a generic rescue inhaler out there. So the cost of all the medications that are involved in being alpha-1, other ones, pulmonary rehab. I mean, everybody knows pulmonary rehab is absolutely a necessity to keep one's health in check. You know, it's as important as anything. Exercise. And you get a pulmonary rehab program for 5, 6, 8 weeks, then it's gone. And unless you can afford the maintenance program, which I don't, some of you people pay up to $100 a month for a maintenance program at a hospital, or choose to go to Planet Fitness at $10 a month, but you know you're walking into a lot of other people there. So a lot of people shy away from that. Another cost that are associated with therapy and treatment would be nutrition. And you know, you get those gain weight drinks, and they're extremely expensive. There's nothing that's prescribed that you'd maybe just have a copay for. So those are some of the financial costs. But there's other costs along with that, and that would be one thing I think is just expectations. You know, you're a young family, you've got a kid, 6-year-old, and all of a sudden, bang! Everything that was, I hate, but all of a sudden, you find your world is turned upside down, and everything from savings, what you're doing in the future, everything has to be revamped because you have a sick child with liver disease. Or you're 40 years old and you find yourself diagnosed with alpha-1 and know that you can't go back to the work that you were doing. And having choices to make, change of vocation. What do you do? It's very difficult. And the spouse, or the mates, or the, what's the word? The partner, thank you. Partner, all of a sudden has to take the slack up. And it can be very difficult, strain on the relationship, in the marriage, and the kids are all along, and they're seeing it too. I mean, the family dynamics are affected by that. So what do we need? We need a cure. And we need a cure that gives us a future to look forward to. And the cure is going to be in the liver. You know, some type of liver, something or other, is going to give us a better chance. Maybe not for us, but for our children. So we got to stay motivated. We got a good leader, Pitbull, John Walsh, and we got one coming up who's snarling a little bit, and Henry Mooring. So we got to just keep our faces up and alive with the guys to our right. So thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Jesse?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jesse Young. I'm from San Diego, California. I was diagnosed with alpha-1 when I was 8 weeks old. I am a ZZ. I was born jaundice. My bilirubin numbers were abnormal. So they did some more tests and came back with alpha-1. I had a liver transplant at a USC Medical Center in Los Angeles in 2011. That's what I've done to treat my alpha-1. I was 25 years old at the time. Currently, I get lab work every 3 months to check my liver function. I also meet with my hepatologist and transplant team twice a year to monitor my health and discuss any issues. On rare occasion, I'll have to get an ultrasound and make sure everything's working all right, and I've had to do a few pulmonary function tests, which have been good so far. So far, the treatment with the transplant has been very well. It's working for me very well. I'm currently 4 years post-transplant, and I've had no major complications. I had to go in for an infection one time, and that was it. Pre- and post-transplant for me were like night and day. The difference, it really is just My color, I was so yellow before the transplant. I wasn't the same person. And then after transplant, it's like a switch went off. I could do all the things I wanted to do. I can mountain bike and play softball and hike, and it really is just amazing. Some of the treatment disadvantages that affect my daily life are that now I'm immunocompromised because of the transplant. So I have to take the anti-rejection pills. Remembering those can be a pain sometimes every 12 hours, but it's a small price to pay. It's also difficult when I have a little toddler running around and he touches every germy thing in the world. Got to catch whatever he's running around with. Before the transplant, I was a veterinary technician, and I can no longer do that because of the higher risk to infection. So when I go back to work, I'll have to find something new. Luckily, I've been able to be a stay-at-home dad for the last 3 years, so that's worked out for me. Some of the ways my treatment has changed over the years, since I was diagnosed so young, when I was an infant, I was on a special formula called Portogen that would often make me projectile vomit, and so that was not fun for anybody around me. As a child, I was on Ursidol for a short time, but they determined that they couldn't tell whether that was helping or not doing anything at all, so we decided to discontinue that. And then when I was 16 through 24 years old, I required no medication. I leveled out since I was an infant from my childhood to my teen years, and I was doing great. And then when I turned 24, everything just went downhill. My liver decided it was not working with me anymore. I then needed various medications to manage the complications of liver failure. I was on diuretics for the ascites. At one point, I believe they tapped 10 liters of fluid out of my left lung. So not breathing is not fun. I know this room knows that. Then I had insomnia, very bad, cramping. I was on a low-sodium diet, and it just completely changed my personality until I received the transplant when I was 25 years old. Excuse me. Some of the negative aspects of my treatment, the anti-rejection medication, they can be really hard on your kidneys. So I could be looking at a kidney transplant eventually. And they can also, they put me at a higher risk for diabetes and skin cancer. The treatment that has the most positive impact on my life was without a doubt having the liver transplant. I had a live donor transplant when I was 25. My girlfriend at the time was my donor. So without her, I would not be here today. Shout out to my wife now. The day after I got out of the hospital, I took her out for a belated anniversary and I proposed. Decided I really couldn't live without her. Since then, we've gotten married, and we have he's almost 3 now, a little boy, and we have a daughter on the way next month, soon. And so I have that going for me, which is amazing. If I could create my own treatment, I honestly don't know what it would be, but I know that transplant can be the only thing that is cutting it too close. You're at the end of the rope when you get to that point, so I'm not sure. Alpha 1 has just affected my life from day one. It sent me on a different path at different times. I couldn't join the military when I turned 18 to follow in my father's footsteps, knowing that it could eventually affect my children's children is really hard. So I also just want to thank my parents. I can't imagine how they deal with stuff, being the parent of an alpha, to all the parents. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think all of our panelists did a great job. Let's thank them again. Now, Not surprisingly, we're running a little bit behind, but before we get to asking questions, we are going to have a presentation of the Alpha One Foundation survey data that matches this, and we're going to invite Gordon Cadogan to come forward. Was it close? Well, thank you. Cadugan. Well, here he is.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to come to the FDA, and thank you to our afternoon panel. I think it was an outstanding panel, and it certainly is a wonderful presentation as this morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Alpha One survey. Oh, I should say, yes, what is my position? I'm Gordon Cadugan, diagnosed with Alpha One in 1992, and have been working diligently for the last 8 or 9 years to forward our mission at the foundation. I'm now chairman of the board of the Alpha One Foundation. So the results I'm going to talk about, we were asked to look at our current treatments, lung affected, and rate them from extremely dissatisfied to extremely satisfied, with categories in between, 5 categories top to bottom. So I isolated the data for percentage of respondents who are either satisfied or extremely satisfied with each of the areas I'm going to mention. IV therapy. Now remember, we had 1,300 plus individuals responding to this. IV therapy, 75% of the individuals on IV therapy said that they were satisfied or extremely satisfied with their IV therapy. I might point out that IV therapy began approximately in 1990, and we owe the FDA a great debt for, in my opinion, going out on a limb and approving a new therapy which had not been used or tried ever before, and the only condition was that they follow alphas, as many of you know, 1,000 alphas for 5 years, and report on those results. So kudos to the FDA for doing that. Oxygen use, only about half of us, 54%, are happy, are satisfied, or extremely satisfied with our oxygen therapy. Inhaled therapies, approximately the same. 60% say they are satisfied or extremely satisfied. Oral steroids, as you can expect, as we all know, that's a double-edged sword. 40% are satisfied or extremely satisfied. Prophylactic antibiotics. I was surprised at the number of respondents saying they are, 20% said they are satisfied or extremely satisfied using prophylactic antibiotics. Positive comments from our responders about IV therapy. I have less infections. My lung function is either stabilized or only declining slowly. My home infusions work very well. And many credited IV augmentation therapy with saving their lives and allowing them to be as healthy as they possibly thought they could be. Now, obviously, there are also some things that aren't good about IV therapy. It's inconvenient. I have to do it too frequently. Where it is administered, if that's a clinic or a hospital, the cost and access to that therapy. And finally, the efficacy. In other words, many of us still experience a decline in lung function in spite of being on the therapy. People say, I hate needles. I hate that every week treatment. It's too long travel time to the clinic or the hospital. I worry about catching something at the clinic or the hospital. I used to be able to do my infusions at home. My insurance changed, and now I have to go to the hospital. So here are a couple of other quotes. Augmentation therapy saved my life. No hospitalizations since I've been on augmentation. I can honestly say that the difference from having no augmentation therapy to having augmentation therapy is monumental. Before therapy, I knew I wasn't going to be long on this earth. Granted, it took a bit of time, but my quality of life has improved tremendously. I have a life again. It gives us a fighting chance. Oxygen use. Obviously, it helps those of us who are on oxygen therapy. It helps us with our day-to-day activities. Exercise and just breathing and breathing normally. The negatives, heavy tanks or a concentrator are hard to pull around. It's embarrassing sometimes. People stare at me. It tends to dry my sinuses out and cause sinus problems. I have to plan my trips carefully to make sure I have enough medical and supplies to take care of my oxygen needs. Inhaled therapies. The positive, of course, is that many individuals feel that they work very well for them. Short-lived, the negatives might be that they're short-lived. They don't seem to help the side effects of not being able to breathe. It's only temporary relief. No perceived improvement in my breathing ability when I use them. And, of course, you can't tell if long-term inhalers are doing any good. And, of course, the one person mentioned thrush. And if you've ever had a thrush infection, you know how debilitating and painful that can be. For liver-affected, current treatments, very few treatment options for liver-affected alphas. Few people reported even using any of the available treatments. But those that did use treatments said that they were satisfied with those treatments because it was all that was available. Liver transplant, 22% who have had liver transplant were very happy with that transplant. Ursodiol, use of ursodiol, 13% were satisfied or extremely satisfied. Paracentesis, 13% said they were satisfied or extremely satisfied. One liver transplant said, the last place any alpha should be to get any treatment is in a facility where there are a lot of sick people. Non-clinical therapies. Thank you. Non-clinical therapies. I was amazed at some of the things that people identified. Non-clinical therapies, people said their alpha-1 support group was the best therapy. 64% said that that was the best therapy they had after their medical therapies. Next was peer guidance. So just talking amongst ourselves means a great deal to everyone. Lots of people reported having mental health treatment for obviously depression and other issues. I would hazard a guess that most of us have had this problem. It's no different than dealing when you're first diagnosed. It's no different than dealing with a death in the family. You have to go through the stages. You've got a lot to learn. You've got a lot to deal with. You've got a lot of reorganizing of your life to do, and that causes tremendous stress and anxiety. If you have a significant other, a great caregiver like many of us do, you've got half the battle won. Biggest challenges I'd mentioned with current treatments, the inconvenience, the cost. We want a more efficacious treatment. What would be the ideal treatment? Percentage of respondents who chose each of the areas below. Less expensive, 70% said that was top. Oral, nasal, or subacute administration, 70% chose that. Longer lasting, 55%. Gene therapy, 50%. And home infusion treatment, 40%. A quote, "I'm worried sick about being able to afford my medications. Depending on my insurance, we would have to come up with $3,100 out of pocket per year. That is almost $300 per month extra. So we had to decide, what do we cut back on? Food, clothes. It worries me sick. I cannot share this with anyone." So obviously, it would be wonderful to have, I love seeing the pills up on the slide this morning. It would be wonderful to have a pill, but that is highly unlikely that that's going to work for alpha-1. Gene therapy is a great possibility that is coming forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so very much. I was remiss, we skipped one of our new FDA panelists, and I want to give him an opportunity to introduce himself before we start.
Hi, it's Howard Chase, and I'm Deputy Director, Division of Hematology Clinical Review in the Office of Blood Research and Review in CBER. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just by a show of hands, how many have heard your own experience with treatments, be it in costs or how it's affected you in one of the stories? Oh, that's a good number. I think it's about 100%. So we're going to go ahead and begin a few more polling questions and get back to the discussion. Chris, can you do the next one? In the past year, what therapies have you or your loved one used to manage anything with your lung symptoms? There's use of inhalers, oral antibiotics, antibiotics given by injection, oral steroids like prednisone, steroids, other steroids, or by injection. So you guys can read. I'll let you continue looking at that. If you are on the web and you haven't gotten, you should have a polling question come up, and when you hit it, you might not notice right away that it's taken, but it has. And if you're writing a comment, just a reminder to hit the enter button when you've done writing the comment, so it'll take for us. All right. So don't close the web one right yet, but let's go ahead and close the line. Well, there were everything but no treatments, it appears. Use of inhalers and oral antibiotics and oral steroids seem to be prevalent. Can we close out the one on the web now and see what we have?
Use of inhalers was 84%, oral antibiotics 78%, oral steroids 68%, respiratory treatments given by nebulizer at home 59%. Those were the most frequent.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's follow up on these. About 7% have other therapies not listed. Does anyone pick up that would like to talk about that? Okay.
Hi, my name's Laura Heller, and I had a wonderful doctor in California a year and a half ago give me sodium chloride 7% for nebulization, and I mixed that with my albuterol, and it helps bring everything up without all the fighting.
Thank you. Any other?
I've just recently been having great success with a really old drug, theophylline, which is a pill form of like albuterol. And it's really helped me out a lot in that I'm not sitting 5 different times during the day with a nebulizer. Allowed me to live life a little bit easier.
Thank you so much. Well, for the rest of you, what's been the most effective treatment that you've had? Anyone want to talk about that? What they've seen as most effective?
Donna, I want to do her. She had her hand up for the last question.
Thank you. One of the things that's been most helpful to me in recent years is regular massage. I have a therapist who comes every week, pounds my back and feel if there's any congestion in my lungs. Working again. Now, it's an expensive hobby or treatment, but a habit, I guess, really. It has done wonders for me. I will be 77 years old. Alpha-1 therapy has worked beautifully. EP1 is not much lower than it was 30 years ago. So I've been very blessed, and I've done lots of holistic things to maintain my health. And the best one is regular massage.
Okay, thank you. We're going to try to give everybody a chance to speak, but...
Thank you. My name is Tom Corrin from Indiana. I would have to agree with whoever brought up the pulmonary rehab the first day. My quality of life improved so much between the before and after of that. And I also want to highlight the support groups as well. And then also the coaching from the health management coaching that's given by my AlphaNet coordinators over the years. So those 3 things.
Thank you. All right.
Me again. I would say prior to the transplant, I would say it was inhalers, but I have some serious issues with them. Number one, there are still inhalers that don't have counters on them. I mean, how the hell am I supposed to tell? If it says I have 200 inhalations, am I going to sit there and tick each one off in my diary every single day? No. Or you can try magic marker on the side, and I know all that kind of stuff, but you want something that's accurate, clear. You can take a look at it. Most of us have failing eyesight due to the steroids. We develop all kinds of cataracts. You know, it's not an easy life, quite frankly. And with inhalers, if you can put a counter on every single inhaler, that would make life so much easier. Secondarily, if you could also push the manufacturers on the covers to the inhalers, the covers to the mouthpieces, if they could make those out of the plastics that are antimicrobial. Because one of the worst things about having an inhaler, you're going through the airport check-in or here, and they say, put your inhaler in this little box. You look in that little box, it's got stuff growing in it. And you want me to use that as a rescue inhaler, and I've already got aspergillus, MAC, and God knows what else growing in my lungs. Just a little thought.
Thank you. He clearly was reading my paper, which said, what are the disadvantages of some of the treatment? So thank you for having, a little ESP.
I'm DC Young from Utah. I'd like to follow up a little bit on Tom Corin's comment. I can't help but follow Tom Corin. Pulmonary rehab. I have a lung function that's surprisingly above 50% and has remained there for 13 years now, thanks to augmentation. And my doctor says, someday you're going to get pulmonary rehab. And I say, well, what does pulmonary rehab do? And they say, well, it helps you preserve lung function. Well, I want to preserve lung function now. Why do I have to get sicker before I can have pulmonary rehab? I've never understood that, but my insurance won't pay for it. The doctors say, no, I can't prescribe it because your insurance won't cover it.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Vorty from Nashville again. I'm just going to talk about pharmacological treatments for exacerbation. I find that prednisone has been very helpful. The problem is the side effects are not very pleasant. I bounce off the walls anyway, so it contributes to that. But when I do have to take them over a long period, I have developed osteoporosis over time, and osteoporosis is can disqualify one for a transplant. And it's a choice of would I want to continue with a high-dose prednisone. I have had my prednisone decreased, but it is very helpful. But I have found it helpful in exacerbations.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Libby from San Diego, and my son has recently become a chiropractor. And it was while he was in school while I was diagnosed, and so he was focusing on the lungs during his time in school. And I find that he has found adjustments that relieve the pressure on my lungs, and I am able to breathe after adjustment. So, chiropractic.
Thank you. What's the web? Is there anything from the web that?
We have quite a few comments. Actually, one individual said that they were unable to take one brand of augmentation therapy because of an allergy to a preservative. There was also concern raised, as was mentioned here, about osteoporosis from steroid use and a request for needing better drugs. There were comments regarding not being able to afford augmentation therapy. One person indicated that their annual or their expenses for this condition in their family went to over $1 million. They had just lost coverage for their pulmonary rehabilitation. There were several people who were interested in the promise of gene therapy, and also people wondering about using stem cell therapy and correcting the defect in stem cells. There was interest to know whether gene therapy clinical trials had begun. So those were some of the web comments.
Great, thank you. Well, I want to focus now. One of the things we heard was on transplantation, so we want to focus a little bit on that. And we're going to ask you two questions before we come back and kick it back out. But I also want to ask the operator to open the phone line. We'll take a question from the phone on this. So, Chris, could you go to question 11? Thank you. Have you or your loved one undergone lung transplantation for emphysema because of alpha-1? Chris? All right, now let's try this again. Now, go. Sorry, if you click forward too fast, which is my mistakes. Thank you. And give you. All right, let's see what we have there, Chris. So 18% have. What about on the web?
For lung transplant, the web's about 10%.
10%, okay. 18 and 10. Let's go to question 12. Have you ever undergone liver transplant? Right? Chris, go ahead and. Oh, 6%. What about on the web? Stop the voting?
Liver is about 6%.
About 6% too?
Same.
So we have about the same on both. So for anyone who's had an impact, who's had a transplant, what's been the impact of that transplant? Up so fast.
Actually, a lung transplant. My name is Kathy Gould. I had a lung transplant 4 years ago, and my life has totally changed. I am doing everything I can, ever I dreamed of. I'm 72 years old, and I'm doing things that I couldn't do at 50. I enjoy life. My PFPs are 140%. What I want to tell you that is so important is exercise. I had like 8% lung function before I got my lung transplant, and I was on a treadmill. I can't say I was actually walking, but I was moving on it. I was lifting weights. I still exercise as much as I could with hardly any ability to breathe at all. And even now I go 5 days a week for 2 hours a day. Thank you very much.
I'm a little shamed here.
My name's Chuck Price. I had a lung transplant 2013, April 28, 2013. And like the lady said, it's just night and day. Going from oxygen, I was at 9% lung function. And again, she's right. Exercise is, pre and post is the only way to go. I wasn't diagnosed. I'm 46. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 41. And by then, my lungs were destroyed, so they just kind of limped me through till they could get me on a list. I went to UVA. Actually got the call on my grandfather's 100th birthday for my transplant. But yeah, night and day. I didn't have any augmentation therapy prior to transplant. And actually I'm on none now and doing pretty well. Same thing. Just, I grew up with a training background. Prior to becoming sick with Alpha-1, I was a power lifter, worked in the iron industry, and was a lot heavier than I am now. But yeah, like I said, I can't think of another way. I don't know what the augmentation was like. So I don't have anything to compare it to other than the steroids and corticosteroids and stuff.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, Donovan Quill from St. Louis, Missouri. Impact of getting a transplant. I think you got to look back through the journey to get to that point. And obviously transplant comes when it's kind of at the end. You have no other choice. But the impact that, we had as kids growing up and watching, our hero or Superman go to basically nothing. Lying on the couch with oxygen on 24 hours a day was very tough. And getting to that point and watching, Dad go through that was one of the hardest things to get through. Now, he's Superman again, and he has that with his grandkids, and running around with them last week. So I'm glad that we have transplantation, but the impact of getting to that point is tough on kids and tough on the family. So, and my mom was the rock through the whole thing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have anybody on the... I have one more in the back. Wait, I'm going to find out if we have anybody on the phone. Do we have anyone on the phone?
Yes. Yeah, my name is Nora. I'm calling from Iowa City. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. I hope to attend, but I am tired out from a previous travel, so I couldn't come. I was diagnosed at age 64, and the day I found out I have Alpha-1, I had never heard of it, ever. And I worked in an academic medical center for 20 years, and yet I'd never heard of it. So I'm a VV alpha. I'm doing pretty well. I'm on augmentation therapy. I'm lung affected. And both my parents died fairly early from complications due to the fact that they were both heterozygous. They both had one allele. They were MZ alphas. They smoked. My dad drank, and it killed them. I would like the FDA or another federal agency to make a public awareness and public education campaign through all kinds of media, because the Alpha Foundation cannot do it all. We individual alphas cannot do it all. We need to really go public on this. It's not a hidden disease. It shouldn't be a hidden disease. It's not even rare. If you consider the heterozygous folks, about 1 in 25 Americans has either homozygous or heterozygous Alpha-1. That's what I have to say.
Well, thank you for that.
Hello, my name is Natalie Manzo. I'm here on behalf of my daughter's father, who passed away from a lung transplant a month ago today. So transplant doesn't always go as easy as it's supposed to. He had the double transplant in February. He was diagnosed in 1999 with Alpha-1, and it's been very, very difficult. So what transplant has done for my daughters, it's taken their father from them.
Thank you. I know there's a lot more to say, however, we have more to get through and time is ticking away. So please, this is one of those prime areas where I encourage you to go to the docket and add additional comments. So please don't think I'm meaning to cut this conversation short. I wish we had all evening to do this. Can we go to the next question? We're going to now focus on augmentation therapy. So are you or your loved one currently receiving augmentation therapy? Okay, let's, Chris. Wow. That's an overwhelming. What's the results from the web?
The web's about 85%, 86%.
Okay, so very similar. Next question. If you or your loved one are being treated with augmentation therapy, what is the current frequency of your treatment regime? So only treated at the time of needed, regular treatment every week, regular treatment every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks or less often. Okay, Chris, let's see. Oh, overwhelming majority regular treatment every week. What about on the web?
It's very close, about 88%.
Okay, great, thank you. And question 15. If you know your dose, do you receive a dose higher than 60? You guys know what that means? Yes? No? I don't know my dose. And we'll give you just one more second. Right, Chris? Okay, so 31% does have a higher dose, and 60% do not, and 9% aren't sure of their dose. What about on the web?
Again, it's very similar. There's about 38% that have a higher dose, and about 12% don't know their dose.
What's the next question, Chris? Which of the following best describes how you or your loved one feel about your current treatment regime? You're satisfied with your current treatment and do not want to change it. You're satisfied but are willing to consider new options. Or C, you're not satisfied. Okay, Chris, can we see what the results are? Okay, so I think the majority in this poll are satisfied but are willing to consider new treatment options. What about online?
Again, it's very similar.
Thank you. So I guess the okay, let's talk about that. So, for those of you who are doing treatment for long, is that what you think the most of is, the 76%? Okay, so then let's talk. And we're going to ask that question. For liver patients, what would you say? See? Okay, so for those of you who are satisfied, what's your biggest reason why you're satisfied? And we'll kind of parse this out. And you can stand up and say what your issue is. Sorry? That you're willing to consider new options? But what would, okay, then I guess let me clarify what I'm asking then. What would you look for in a new option? Ah, there we go. Okay, we hear a cure. Easy access, aerosolized.
I'm Courtney, and I actually did one of the trials with doubling my Zemera dosage, and it's a world of difference. And that's why I'm satisfied with what I have. but I'm not satisfied because we definitely need increased dosage on it.
Okay.
I have someone down back here.
Okay.
Tim Frost from Virginia. Also on this question of dosage of augmentation, one of the questions I have is, at what point, for those of us who are lung affected, do we start our augmentation therapy? Do we need to be at severe COPD emphysema before we get to augmentation therapy? We've heard from many people who say that with augmentation they feel much better. But many of us have had to stop work because we were at severe emphysema. We were feeling better with augmentation. But can we start at an earlier age so that our lung function stays higher longer and makes us much more productive in society rather than having to be retired from our work? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe base the augmentation start on your levels instead of waiting for dysfunction. Why are you going to make someone dysfunctional or handicapped in a society when if you can start something earlier, you can avoid that?
Okay.
One more, Donna.
All right.
Hi, I'm Wendy from Virginia, and I have a 5-year-old son who's EZ, liver affected. I would like more options for my son.
Thank you.
That was quick, so another.
And my name is Katie Ferris. I'm from New Jersey, and I'm the mother of 3 ZZ children, and I echo what this last woman just said.
Thank you. We have someone over here on this side.
My name is Charlotte Madison, and one of the things I fight for is early diagnosis. Early diagnosis so we can put people on augmentation therapy, oral therapy for liver problems, so that we prevent. The key thing we hear now from healthcare is prevention, and we're not really working that hard toward it. Early diagnosis, get them on the proper drugs, the proper treatment, and we prevent the decrease and decline of a person's quality of life.
Okay, great. Thank you. While we're asking this, I guess my question is, do any of you have any concerns over long-term use of the therapies you're on?
Hi, I'm Brad from Kansas City, Missouri. I'm a parent of a ZZ Alpha. I just wanted to echo these comments again. There are no options for our children other than the doctors told us, watch him, see if he gets sicker. He might need a transplant. He may not survive, or he might get better. And that was it. And so we need something for our children. Thank you.
Thanks. Jennifer?
You know, the previous speaker said about this thing of being fairly well and getting augmentation. The same thing applies to the transplantation. The person has to be practically at death's door before they get it, and therefore they are less likely to survive it. In my own case, I was diagnosed very early, and it's held me for 25 years, almost at a certain level. So, and as much as it can be supported and covered by insurance, I don't know how the insurance company look at it, but we all know it's extremely expensive. So if you're getting it for 25 years or 10 years, it's a very big difference. Thank you.
Well, that was a wonderful segue into our next question. Thank you. And he was not a plant. Chris, next question. So what's your level of concern regarding the cost of augmentation therapy? Are you not concerned, mildly concerned, moderately concerned, or very concerned? Okay, Chris, can we get our responses? Ah! I could have guessed this one. I might have even given it that number too, so. What about on the web?
There's 88% that are very concerned, so it's very close.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any thoughts about cost concerns that's not already been expressed? Okay.
I'm Henry Mooring, and I think one of the things that we need to look at in one shape or another, and I'm not sure who it falls to, but we talk about the cost of therapy. We don't talk about the opportunity cost of therapy. If people are not on augmentation, if people are not using their medication and have multiple exacerbations, multiple ICU stays, those costs are never stacked up against augmentation. And I think that the supposition is if you did that, you would see that providing the therapy is the more cost-effective way to go. And I think that's something that we need to push forward faster to have better answers for questions as some of these.
Thank you. Thank you.
Again, my name is Allison Corin, and I'd like to speak as a patient advocate. The patients in this room are all very lucky. They are of a financial persuasion that they can afford insurance or therapy or both. I think we need to speak for those patients who are lower middle class, who have this condition, who are what we would maybe call the working poor. They are working at minimum wage jobs. They can't afford to quit because that's how they get their insurance. They can't afford insurance without a job. They certainly can't afford this therapy without insurance. I have many, many clients who are still working and trying desperately to pay for their medication, just their co-pays. And while there are some financial assistance programs available, those financial assistance programs are running out of money at an extremely high rate and very, very early in the year. So if you're diagnosed in January, you might be able to get financial assistance. If, however, you're diagnosed in July or August, you may not be able to get any financial assistance for your medication.
Thank you. We're going to take one more on this one.
My name's Ruth Cadugan, and I want to touch on kind of what Henry said, in that why aren't we backing up to eliminate some of the cost going through this horrible process of getting to the point where you are able to comply with getting a transplant? You know, let's pay it forward instead of pay it back and wait till people suffer. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, the numbers for the transplants. I think everybody in here that I heard who got a transplant was less than 10%, usually 9 or 8%, which is barely living. And that's how sick you have to be to get there. And part of that is the allocation. Now, I'm going to step out and say something that I only know from my life, but I believe it was changed a while ago, and it was implied that alphas do better than some of the other conditions that require a lung transplant. Alphas live longer, even if they only have 7% lung function. And so I think even the allocation system for who gets transplants also needs to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think this is one of those cases where there's a lot of more discussion we could have, but we have to move on because we're already about 40 minutes behind. So can we go to our next question? If you are not currently on augmentation therapy, would you start with an inhaled formulation if one were approved? Okay. think maybe hypothetically speaking is what we're going for here. I clearly did, so. Wait, then we won't talk much about this when we see it. If this, can we go ahead and see the results? Okay, so between those of you who are on it already, let's go to the next question. And I'm sorry, we'll get that from you. If you are currently receiving augmentation therapy, what factors would influence a decision to possibly switch to an inhaled formulation if one were approved by the FDA? Check all that apply. Convenience, tolerability, efficacy as compared, cost. Well, stickers stopped going up, so let's go ahead and see it. I know we don't have very many responding at this point. Okay, so convenience is a big factor. What about on the web?
I think you could have had an all of the above answer.
Thank you. So we don't have much time to really talk about this, so we're going to only take like two responses. So I guess my question for you is, what considerations helped you answer this question? I think I see someone's hand that I haven't heard from. Lonnie over there.
Wait.
Hi, I'm Jenny Fall from Pennsylvania. And the only thing that I can add to that, the convenience, tolerability, efficacy, and cost in a consideration is I have a benefit that I received from augmentation therapy that isn't what I understand is typical. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia before I was diagnosed with alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. When I started augmentation therapy, within 2 months, I no longer had the symptoms of fibromyalgia at all. And I believe, I've been told that it's because of the high anti-inflammatory properties of the protein. So for me to go on an inhaled version of the therapy, I am concerned because I might lose that systemic benefit. And honestly, in the 9 years I've been on therapy, my life is so much better than being off of therapy and having the symptoms of what was called fibromyalgia. So that's another consideration that I have in another kind of therapy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Because we're behind, let's spend a few minutes talking on what you think is an ideal therapy. Chris, next slide, Chris. So tell me how existing therapy, now I know we've mentioned that some of these questions are you've hit on in other questions. So what we're really going to ask you to talk about are what you think, how current therapies could be improved, or what are you looking for in an ideal therapy, and any other comment that has not already been discussed today. Okay. Lonnie?
I think the big question is the cost of the therapy. Otherwise, probably the room would all value the therapy forever.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to suggest that we find a therapy that we can give ourselves. We don't like to have to go to the hospital or have people come in to give it to us. You can see we're all responsible. We do what we can. So give us a form of therapy, augmentation if necessary, that we can actually do ourselves, and we'll do it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, I have a couple, okay.
Kathy Gould again. I ran a support group for about 12 years, and 2 people in my support group also got lung transplants. The only difference between them and myself is that I continued on the augmentation therapy, and I don't know exactly how this works, even though I'm a nurse, but the other 2 didn't. Their doctors didn't keep them on the IV augmentation therapy, and they were in the hospital, in and out, in and out. They're still, right now, one of them is in the hospital, and I can actually say I never went. Since I had my therapy, I've never been in the hospital, and I've continued for 16 years with my augmentation therapy. So the efficacy of it, I believe, is 100%. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lana, you have someone?
Hi, my name is Len Geiger. I'm a ZZ Alpha 1. I'm one of the lucky ones in that I was the one diagnosed instead of a loved one, because I don't think I could have handled that. Also one of the lucky ones in that I had a lung transplant. So I'm 13 years out with double lung transplant. But the topic that I just wanted to bring up was compliance with medication. Efficacy is tied to compliance, right? And the easier it gets to take a medication, the easier it is to not take a medication. Like blood pressure medications. I mean, how many people are actually compliant with that? Or even your own inhalers. How many people really use that long-acting beta agonist on a routine basis as it's supposed to be given? A lot of people don't. And so that's just a concern that I'd like to bring up. I mean, if you have an appointment every week where a nurse comes to your house, or you have an appointment where you go somewhere, you do it. And you might miss a week or 2, but you don't just fall off the grid because nobody's really tracking you anymore.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, do you have someone?
Tim Frost again from Virginia. We've been talking a lot today about alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency as a liver disease, as a lung disease. I'd like you to be thinking more strategically, more holistically. Let's think, and we've been talking a lot about strategies for dealing with symptoms. Let's look for strategies dealing with causes. So there's an awful lot of very promising research being done right now that is intended to arrest or possibly even reverse the alpha-1 antitrypsin liver disease. Let's think about some of those where our livers are no longer creating the malformed alpha-1 antitrypsin, that we may have therapies using stem cells or using genetic therapies that allow us to create the proper alpha-1 antitrypsin. And then let's think about the lung disease. Are there therapies that can help us reverse the causes of our lung disease and reverse the damage to our lung tissue? We hear the miracles from a number of our colleagues who have gotten a lung transplant and a liver transplant, and how transformative that is. Can we do that with the tissue that we have on our own? Let's think innovatively. Let's think aggressively on how we can cure alpha-1 antitrypsin.
My name's Jim Quill, and I'd just like to touch on a few things that have been said as far as treatments are concerned. And one of the, probably the most effective treatment that I had when I think about the fact that I've had a transplant, I've lived many years with alpha-1 prior to the transplant, but probably my most effective treatment was AlphaNet. And the reason I say that is because my AlphaNet coordinator was extremely instrumental. First of all, it was someone who also had alpha-1, and it was someone who was constantly reinforcing all the things I needed to do to keep healthy. You know, making sure that I had my vaccines, making sure that I was keeping my doctor appointments, making sure that I was doing my augmentation therapy on a weekly basis and staying on schedule, making sure that if I was taking a trip, I knew what I needed to do as far as oxygen adherence was concerned. And all of those things medically that we need to do to stay healthy. And I know it was mentioned a lot and in pieces here today, but I know through AlphaNet, and I hope everybody here that is an Alpha is connected to AlphaNet, because it is through that program that truly has brought me to where I am. And it's also, I know it's the hope of all the AlphaNet coordinators, and there are many here in the room that are here as Alphas themselves to participate, but they're also here as advocates for all of you. And I'm certain that if you connected with your AlphaNet coordinator and listened to the sometimes annoying, nudging they do every month, but all of it's in the avenue of keeping you well and helping you to adhere to all the things that we talked about today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I have an inkling from the enthusiasm of these conversations that you guys have a lot more that you might want to mention. Again, we'll go to the docket, and we're going to go to our next section. And I'm going to go ahead and thank our panelists up here, and they can go ahead. Let's clap, and we're going to talk about clinical trials. When you go back to your seat. And for this, operator, we'll open the phone line and take in a bit a question on about clinical trials. So this is going to be your perspective on participating in a clinical trial, and I think based on some of the conversations I've heard, we've got people who believe strongly that they would and strongly that they would not. So it's really what we're going to be exploring a bit more. So Chris, can you go to the next question? So if you had the opportunity to consider participating in a clinical trial studying experimental treatments, what things would you consider when deciding whether or not to participate? I guess this is not a question. This is just kind of asking you, what would you consider?
I've seen some trials that part of the group is on a placebo, and my lung function isn't good enough that I can risk being on a placebo for 6 months or 2 years or whatever the duration.
Okay. Bonnie, did you have someone?
I thought I had someone, but I don't. Oh, you do.
Hello. Okay, wait a minute. I have someone who I don't believe spoken yet.
Excuse me, I have spoken yet. I'll defer. Okay, thank you. Judith Vargas, Concord, Massachusetts again. If you saw the results of how we feel about our prolactin or our augmentation, it seems to me that it's not really appropriate that you should ask us to stop doing something that we love so much that's given us back our lives. We are willing to give you every piece of information you could possibly want about how this has changed our lives, because many of us are very introspective and we pay attention to details. So I would offer all my history to you, and you can publish it wherever you like. But I don't want you to take away my augmentation. I will take it in any form that you want me to try to take it in. But please, don't take it away. Thank you.
Hi, Liz again. I would not want to give up augmentation either. Actually, I would not give it up. But if there were clinical trials for liver, I am right there.
Over here, Donna, next, and then
Hi, Brad Zelk from Kansas City again. One thing I'd like to see is more opportunities for children to participate so that we can get some treatments for them. I know it's very difficult. There's ethical issues all around it. But with no options for kids, how else can we get one if we don't provide someone the opportunity to provide a trial? I would sign my children up. I mean, if it's going to go by an IRB and it's going to have full disclosure, Give me the chance to say yes or no. Don't just say it's too hard to do something for kids. Give us the chance.
Thank you. Bonnie, did you have someone else?
I'm D.C. Young again. I have some experience on clinical trials. I started augmentation in 2004. In 2006, there was an opportunity for a clinical trial that I joined, and I had to stop my augmentation for 3 months. Now I look back at that, and that was a mistake, because in that 3 months, I got sick again, whereas I had gotten much better during the first 2 years of my augmentation. And since that time, I've had opportunity to join several trials and have joined some. And I'll join any trial because I can travel that does not require me to get off my augmentation. Thank you.
Okay.
You want to know?
We're going to take one more call, response.
Sort of like
because
two
we're
votes.
going to have a couple more questions about this, so I think you'll have an opportunity. I see everyone pointing to her.
Hi, my name's Debbie. I'm from Virginia, and I'd just like to see more trials for those that are not necessarily ZZ. There's a lot of other variations. I'm an SV. There are very few trials, but I think we're important, too, to know how this affects us just as much.
Okay, thank you. I see your hand, but I promise you these next questions will be effective for you, too. Let's go to the next question. So, have you ever participated in any type of clinical trial studying investigational treatments? I think we've heard yes, but let's go ahead and get a number here. And Chris, let's go ahead and close it. I know we're doing that a little faster. And what do we have? So 48% have, 26% aren't sure if they've been part of one. What about on the web?
On the web, it's about 1/3 have participated in a trial.
I'm sorry, how many?
About 1/3.
About 1/3? Okay. So, what I'd like to know now is, what are your considerations for participating and what factors influence your decision? And she doesn't even have her hand up, but I'm thinking it's similar to the last question, and since so many people... Oh. Okay, well, we'll do this question then. So if you or your loved one have the opportunity to participate in a clinical or investigational treatment, which best describes your thoughts? You're willing to consider, I'm not willing to consider, or my participation would depend on various factors. Okay, Chris, let's see these responses. So generally willing or maybe. Okay. How's the web?
On the web, it's 28% willing, only 3% not willing, and 68% maybe, depending.
Okay. I'm just going to go to you and let you just, Kathy, whatever you want to talk. Yeah, for about 30 seconds.
This is Kathy Horsack, and I think you're echoing, everybody's echoing, they're concerned about bronchoscopies, they're concerned about liver biopsies, because their health depends on it. And then one of the other people mentioned MZs would love to be in a study. SCs would love to be in a study. Almost every study that we have is limited to ZZs. I think you've got a willing, our community is very willing to participate. Give us things to participate in.
Thank you.
Donna.
Bonnie.
Hi, Laura Heller again. About 8 years ago in Philadelphia, there was a study of doubling the amount that you took of the prolactin. And I hired a babysitter, got subs at work, took a train in, went through a whole series of tests, and the woman looked at me like I was a dog that had been run over by a truck. And she said, your breathing level's only at 30%, we can't use you. So I think a lot of the people in this room who are afraid of losing
on the therapy, they're not even, they wouldn't be considered to do something that's dangerous.
Okay, thank you. Want to have someone behind?
Okay. Carla Laddick from Indiana. I think that the maybe part of the factors with that is travel. A lot of people are already compromised with their health, and they can't travel to the various locations that have the different opportunities for study.
Okay, thank you. This is a hot button topic. We're going to take one more, and then we're going to ask another question.
I'm a ZZ. My 3 daughters are all ZZs, and my husband's an MZ. We've probably been in 15 studies combined. And the one daughter has never been on the infused antitrypsin. And so she went down to Florida for 6 months. 3 months turned out to be a placebo. And this was an awful waste of money and time and effort, because if you haven't been on anything, that's like being on a placebo all your life up until that point. So I would rather they'd start out with maybe 1 dose a day and then double it for the next 3 months. But I've been to the St. Louis hospital and had a biopsy, liver biopsy last month with Karen Fraser, and my other daughter had a biopsy at Florida. And it's very, very simple. It's, to me, easier than getting a filling in a tooth. So please consider it. I had to go to St. Louis, by the way, because I'm too old for Florida.
Thank you. We have one more question that's along the clinical trials. Let's see what that is. Would you be willing to participate in a placebo-controlled clinical trial conducted in patients? I don't even know why I'm asking this question, but would you? I get you. And we'll go ahead and see what we have with only sending. Wow, I'm shocked. I would not have guessed this. What about online?
The yeses are 11%, 12%. The no's are 73%, and the not sures are about a little over 13%.
So a little more not sure there. Let's see.
Active placebo. You do it all the time in epilepsy. Why don't you do it for alpha-1 antitrypsin? Very simple. Lower the dose to half normal. Use that as your placebo, and then go either full dose or double dose. And as well as any retrospective meta-analysis you want to do, but simply active placebo. That way everybody's still on drug. It'll still cover them. May not be as effective, but you're not taking them completely off.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more comments.
Don Tolan from Oklahoma City. It's real simple to me. I was on the double dose study, and you either got 60 or you got 120. It's what we need to do is readdress our focus. What I want is the enzyme, and I want the enzyme given so that during the entire week I'm up in normal levels. Because after the study, they upped my dose to 90, and now during the entire week of augmentation therapy, I stay normal on antitrypsin. That's the secret, and that's what you ought to measure on how much the dose ought to be, is to get the normal dose of antitrypsin. Now, give it to me any way you want. I'll take it in any flavor, any combination, as long as my enzyme keeps me in the normal level during the week.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know there were a lot of hands going up and a lot of things that could be said, but it's doing a little bit of heartbreaking that we're kind of coming to the end of this open part of the discussion. But I know that the Alpha-1 Foundation in their survey asked some questions about clinical trials and willingness to it. And we are going to have John Walsh. We're going to invite him to speak for 5 minutes from the podium.
We have to tell Vanna I can't spell 5 minutes. I mean Donna, not Vanna. Donna's done a great job. Big hand for Donna. She's incredible. Well, I think there's no question that we've established beyond any doubt to the FDA that we did what they asked us to do, to bring a representative group of individuals with alpha-1 to this meeting. I almost feel I shouldn't waste time going over the survey results regarding the questions on clinical trials, because what you just went through, the exercise I just went through, hits it, to the T. So we had 1,425 individuals take the survey. 1,000 opted to answer the questions on clinical trials. Probably the only reason for that is it was an open-ended question. So the question was, and anybody that hasn't taken the survey will be scolded here, but and those online that aren't taking the survey, it's still on the Alpha-1 Foundation website. Take it. We want more numbers than 1,425. If you or your family member had the opportunity to consider participating in a clinical trial studying experimental treatments, what things would you consider when deciding whether or whether not to participate? Duh. I mean, I think the big one out there, it's not an elephant, it's bigger than an elephant. The majority of our respondents, 39.6%, indicated that access to the trial was the most important issue. That includes issues like location, travel time, cost, and convenience. And, as we do trials in our community, we can recruit for a phase 3 pivotal study that doesn't involve a placebo in somewhere between 6 and 13 weeks. And we have 80% of our community enrolled in our research registry. So we can reach out and touch you right away and have you participate. We don't have any trouble recruiting for trials, but it's got to be the right design. Outside of that, 30.6% were concerned about safety and whether the trial would harm their health or worsen their health. So many, and this is probably the reason, many would not enroll in a trial if they had to stop their augmentation therapy. Some respondents even noted that they previously participated in trials, but their health worsened by stopping augmentation therapy during that time. We've heard that over and over again the last few minutes. So augmentation therapy, Ross, I know you were questioning whether there's enough data out there. I know it's not a perfect study. We can't let perfect get in the way of good. But there's no question in the minds of individuals on augmentation therapy in the United States that are fortunate enough to have access to augmentation therapy that it works. So I think that the RAPID trial that was 13 countries, most people outside of the U.S. because there was a placebo arm, over $100 million invested, was published in the Lancet, and the EMA just accepted it. And that's going to open the door, hopefully, for access to augmentation therapy to our cousins in Europe. Another concern surrounding clinical trial design that we found through the survey, that alphas are willing to do just about anything to participate in a clinical trial. We have a waiting list, and they shut down the trial now, for lymph perfusion delivery of gene therapy at University of Massachusetts. And that is incredibly invasive. And we had a standing line for that. We have over 160 people in the 2 studies that take a liver biopsy for our adult liver study for the natural history of liver disease. Whoever thought that would happen? We got a waiting list at those sites for people to go and have liver biopsies. That's pretty invasive. A couple of things that I might just highlight here is comments that people made. I would happily donate myself alive to a lab to do tests, treatments on if it meant a cure for all alphas. That is the mentality. That's the mindset of our community. Sacrifice for others, but obviously a concern about our own health on the other side. I think discomfort and safety, another quote, I think discomfort and safety are continuously redefined as this disease progresses. Nothing was too much to ask at the end, and I would do anything, assume any risks to avoid that and save my friends. Final comment in this section, I would try anything that may help, because this is not living. This is just being here. So overall, it was an incredibly favorable, positive response to the willingness of individuals with alpha-1 to participate in clinical research. The benefits of clinical research need to be weighed against the risks, and it's not the normal risk-benefit formula you consider. Does not just mean safety of the treatment, they include the risk of stopping therapy that they know works, on participating in a trial that they may mean to receive a placebo. And one respondent summed it up, I have taken part in 2 clinical trials early in my diagnosis before I was able to start augmentation therapy. I have considered taking part in a few recent trials, but the distance to get to the clinical site is a deterrent. But most importantly, I am not willing to be involved in a double-blind study where I might receive a placebo. The bioethics community in America agrees with this. IRBs all across the land are refusing to let their investigators participate in clinical studies with placebos. There has to be a better way. I would want to be able to continue with my infusions since I know that they are working, and take the trial treatment to see if there's more improvement. I would not consider stopping what is already working for me. It is terrifying not to be able to breathe. One more quote here. Placebos. I just got back to feeling almost normal. I don't want to take a step back just to participate in a trial. So I think one of the things that we would like the FDA to consider, this is from the foundation perspective, it wasn't a question here, is on some of these phase 4 requirements, or even study design requirements, let's force industry to work together. I mean, $100 million here, $100 million there, $100 million to a third company or a fourth company to do a trial that's a little bit different, looking at things a little bit differently. We've got 2 phase 4 clinical trials right now going on that require the use of placebo. It's not going to be done in the U.S., it's going to be done overseas. The one double-blind placebo study that's been completed, the RAPID study, we will never see a study that large, that definitive, ever again in our community. And I think the investigator community would totally embrace that. Our scientific leadership certainly does. So let's work together to get the companies out there now working on phase 4, drop the placebo, make them work together, and let's find out what the dose is. And let's work with the biomarkers team at the FDA and identify a biomarker like desmosine. And the COPD Biomarkers Qualification Consortium has selected this as one of the biomarkers that we want to take forward. And let's be able to measure whether or not augmentation therapy works and alter it based on the desmosine level. So the Alpoint community is ready, willing, and able to do whatever we can to help advance and accelerate therapeutic development. We're partnering with you, the FDA, in this effort, with industry and with the scientific community. And we need solutions. We cannot let perfect, that gold standard double-blind placebo, get in the way of good. So thank you for the opportunity to present these data.
Thank you so much. Well, now we've come to our open public comment period. The docket is full. We have 15 people who are going to get 2 minutes to speak. And what we're going to do is we're going to call out their name and we're going to walk to them. So, Jennifer?
I'm behind you, Donna. Hi, I'm Jennifer Scharf. I'm with the Office of Blood and CBER, and I spoke with many of you as we planned this meeting, and I just want to extend my thanks to everyone here for your participation today. So our first speaker will be Jennifer Murray. No? Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of folks have signed up, may have already expressed their opinions. That's okay. So if you decline, just let us know. Eric Butcher?
My name's Eric Butcher from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm both a lung and adult onset liver affected alpha with stage 2 COPD, but stage 4 cirrhosis. Currently, part of my liver is compensating, but no one knows for how long. I am only 42 years old, a father of 3, and quite frankly, I'm not ready to die yet. There are currently 3 American pharmaceutical companies who have developed very promising treatments for the liver, but have so far had to perform their trials overseas. A good clinical trial must be developed that will get us liver-affected alphas a treatment that is both safe as well as effective. We cannot let the pursuit of perfection get in the way of providing us a good treatment. When we have 1,500 people or more dying each year while waiting for a liver, in this case, something is better than nothing. We have something promising now. We need to get it available to patients as soon as possible. I also represent nearly 350 liver-affected alphas from around the world. One of them mentioned that he would like me to relay thanks to the FDA for their role in fast-tracking augmentation therapy so many years ago. Without that, a lot of us would not be here now. So thank you. I would ask that you help us get these liver treatments to trial and ultimately to market the same way. Additionally, we desperately need a widespread and frequent standard testing protocol because that is the key to identifying the complete breadth of our problem, the number of alphas actually out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Robin Bell?
I'm a 46. Wait, my glasses on, I can't see. I'm a 46-year-old lung-affected alpha with stage 3 COPD. Having shortness of breath due to emphysema and asthma is quite a burden to live with being a loving and involved mother to an 8-year-old daughter. Exacerbations are particularly bothersome for me as I have to be extra careful having an elementary age school child. As we all know, germs are passed around liberally through school systems. When these are brought home, I run the risk of becoming infected, having exacerbations, and thus damaging my lungs further. Both my little girl and I currently dance on a regular basis. However, with dancing, I'm finding it increasingly difficult because of my emphysema and my shortness of breath. Dancing is my passion, but currently, without completely following my inhaler regimen, as well as nearly use of my rescue inhaler, it's both troublesome and worrisome. In 2012, I donated my left kidney to my twin sister. 2 weeks prior to this, my oldest sister died, I start crying, of liver cancer, probably due to alpha-1, but was never diagnosed. After experiencing many complications resulting from donating my kidney to my twin sister and compromising my own health, I was finally diagnosed with alpha-1 a year later. Had my sisters and I been tested and diagnosed much earlier, our lives and their lives may have run a different course. We as a community need a standard testing protocol developed and implemented to enable earlier diagnosis.
Thank you, Robin. Sandy Sandhouse?
I'm probably the first one here who's not a patient, unfortunately, or fortunately. But I am representing the over 5,200 patients that AlphaNet follows and that I help direct the care of through AlphaNet. I also have run the Alpha-1 program at National Jewish Health in Denver for the last 35 years. And I was asked to present the opinions that and questions that patients presented to me and sent to me over the last several weeks that weren't mentioned here. And I'm happy to say that I've been gradually checking off and eliminating the comments. So I'll go through these very quickly. Our view is that we teach alpha-1 patients to be the experts in their disease because they really usually don't find an expert in their own local community. The issues that were brought up is the need for newborn screening for alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, the need for a post-lung transplant augmentation therapy trial, the need for an augmentation therapy trial on the use of alpha-1 augmentation therapy in non-tuberculous mycobacterial infections. And I'll be back here in 2 weeks to talk about that. We need a registry of alpha-1 liver-affected individuals, including children, and including children on the waiting list for transplant, because this is one major impediment to drug development in children with liver disease. We would hope that fast-track approval for drugs could be facilitated because that can impact the course of liver disease, since many individuals have a very short time from the identification of liver injury in alpha-1 to liver failure, death, or liver transplantation. We would ask, and this is a strong comment from a lot of patients, that all studies looking at novel therapeutics for COPD in general and liver disease in general include alpha-1 antitrypsin deficient patients in those studies. You're taking up my time. Virtually every drug that alpha-1 patients take other than augmentation therapy is a drug that's never been tested in alpha-1 patients for their indicated usage. And finally, I actually have a plea of my own, and that is every week, often several times a week, I get emails from patients asking about the Lung Institute, the Stem Cell Institute, the Stemgenics, all of these industries that have popped up throughout the country that purport to cure COPD and cure liver disease and cure lung disease by giving people injections of their own stem cells. I've been to the FDA website. It has a very beautiful explanation of the concerns about that and also the reasons that the FDA feels they don't have a role in regulating these institutions that are essentially money-making scams. But the fact that the FDA doesn't do anything about those centers are using as essentially advertise that the FDA leaves them in business. And I think that the lack of action is a tacit approval, at least in terms of the opinions that I hear from patients. And if it's the FTC that has to get involved, if there's a referral, that would be great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alice Sneddon.
Hi, my name is Elise Sneddon. I'm from Fitchburg, Massachusetts. I'm here today not only for me, but for my father. He failing fast. I'm here just to ask. We really have to have our loved ones so sick in order to have a transplant. Is there something that can give them peace and comfort from their sick and dying bodies that can be done? Depression, the anxiety, just living in a shell of yourself, I see through my father every day. And It's just not fair in 2015. I think there's something that could be done, and I think that it should be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Ruth Cadugan.
I'm Ruth Cadugan, and I think you've heard here today, a minute ago, we have educated our doctors. In 1992, when my husband was diagnosed, there wasn't an internet. There wasn't anybody that I could reach out and touch. And we educated people. We went to the source, got the information, take care of ourselves. Very little hospitalization because we take care of ourselves. We know how to do that. We're living longer, and living longer, unfortunately, because we take care of ourselves, we are going to have more liver problems. That is certain. Once those occur, we don't have time to do a lot about it. And take care of yourself. You can't fix it. We have 2 MC daughters, and we lose an alpha a day. At the national conference, we have a ceremony in the morning. Fred and Joe run that service, and every year the list gets longer and longer of loved ones that we have lost. We've got to diagnose and treat. Life expectancy just last year, I think it was at the conference, went from 55, which is what it was when my husband was diagnosed at 48, to 61 years old. Not most disease communities are making their life expectancy longer by working as hard as we do to take care of ourselves and learn what that is. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith Vargas.
Yes, Judith Vargas Vila, Concord, Massachusetts. You've heard from me too much probably this time. But I came with a list, and I'm going to go back over it. Unfit as we are, we have survived. I would like to give that gift to the young people, the children who are born. We take a heel prick of blood for PKU for most newborns. My daughter's a midwife, and she tells me that. Why can't we add the diagnosis of alpha antitrypsin to it? We could save liver people and lung people. I was actually jaundiced for 3 weeks when I was born, but way back in 1941, they just put me in the sunshine, and they hoped that I would get better. I did, but from what I hear in this meeting, maybe I'm just lucky on that one. Oxygen is free for all in this world, isn't it? Except to us. We are the kind of people to whom oxygen is a controlled substance. And you people have a great deal to do with how it's controlled. I want liquid oxygen for myself in Massachusetts, but the delivery people, the providers of oxygen, are closing off access to liquid oxygen in Massachusetts. I don't know if you at the FDA have a lot to do with that, but I've had to beg twice now to get liquid oxygen. And if I have to wait until I have 9% lung capacity in order to get my transplant, I'd really like to have liquid, which makes my life so much easier. And in Massachusetts, we have winters. So therefore, If it's going to snow and blow and freeze and the electricity goes off for a week, I really would like to have liquid oxygen in my house instead of depending on the electricity that isn't there, or have to perhaps get an electricity generator to run my oxygen condenser so I can continue living. That's something that's interesting to me. Why can't we have liquid here? They have it in Europe. Now, I'm also interested in getting oxygen outside. Why can't we have oxygen provisions in drugstores? Why can't we have drive-through oxygen units? You put your card in and you get out oxygen. We need it. You've heard us talk about carrying oxygen on our backs, running around with our machines, living in our houses with our long tubes. We would like to go places. Why can't the airlines loosen up a little and let us have some of the oxygen they've got stored in the planes? We have to go through weeks of organizations and getting prescriptions and filling in forms in order to go anywhere. You can see I'm not dead yet. Sometimes I want to go see my boy in California, and I can't unless I prepare for a couple of weeks ahead of time. And I want an oxygen machine that knows who I am, that responds to my needs. Last week, I went to MIT to attend a hackathon. And while I was there, I had my glasses that had oxygen delivery through the frames. I showed it to them and I said, these don't work because they've got gaskets that don't work. So those boys wrote, there was a girl and two boys, wrote up a program. They took it to a friend who had a laser printer. That night, they laser printed me a pair of oxygen delivery glasses. Now these have little hooks for my nose. They deliver the oxygen and it goes all the way through, and I put them on and I had oxygen. I wore them around for about 10 minutes and my oxygen level stayed up. I was showing this to some of the children we have here in the hotel this morning, and they all wanted them. They said, I want some of your 3D glasses, and I can have the oxygen I need.
Thank you, Judith. If you could summarize, thank you.
I can summarize. I'm saying there's a whole generation of people who want to invent solutions, and we want you to authorize them and give them to us with your stamp of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Peg Iverson.
Hi, I'm Peg Iverson from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm a ZZ alpha. I was diagnosed in 1974. That was 41 years ago. I was diagnosed because my mom was diagnosed unbelievably correctly at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Of course, back then there was no treatment available for alpha-1. My mom never met another alpha, nor had I until years later. My mom did not live, she lived about 9 years after she was diagnosed, and nothing to be done. We weren't fast enough for my mom. I am extremely fortunate. Probably every alpha in the room, all my alpha cousins, would give anything to have been diagnosed at age 21 when my lung function was over 100%. After my mom died, I participated in the National Institutes of Health study in Bethesda, Maryland, which rolled out into clinical resource centers, which for me was in Iowa City at the University of Iowa. I've been followed from that young age to watch my lung function. When it dropped enough for insurance to cover augmentation therapy for me, of course after they could prove that I had emphysema, I was started on augmentation therapy.
My AlphaNet coordinator at that time was my lifesaver in guiding me through that, helping me understand that I knew I could live a good life, educating me thanks to AlphaNet's medical team, Dr. Sandhouse. But we're still not fast enough. We've lost so many Alpha 1 heroes, so many Alpha 1 family members, so many people that are suffering. We need to speed it up. Our community is so involved, so passionate. We're here, we're ready to go. Please help us get there faster. One of my current AlphaNet coordinator is in a hospital right now in ICU with pneumonia, where we need to speed it up and get us there, please. And I thank you, FDA, for this amazing opportunity, for hearing us today and our concerns, and we're counting on you. Please help us.
Thank you, Peg. Bonnie, and I'm sorry, I can't read your last name. Is there a Bonnie who signed up to speak?
Thank you very much. I want to reiterate what so many others have said. It's important to include a usual care control group in order to increase participation. I have participated in clinical trials in the past, and at this point in this stage of my disease, I don't want to give up my augmentation. It seems to be working very well. So I'd like to emphasize that a usual care condition would be very useful. I'm 63 years old, and I was diagnosed in 1996. And as my condition has progressed, obviously I've become dependent on supplemental oxygen. I would like to see more options for restoring function. I'm looking towards a transplant, but I am very much aware that it is not a cure, and that comes with it many risks and many other negative possibilities. I'm hoping for the best, but I am planning for the worst. Using supplemental oxygen, while it's helpful, and we've discussed some of the direct problems and drawbacks of using oxygen, indirectly, it also makes the user very vulnerable. And in this way, it can restrict participation in public events and being a part of the social world. So to summarize again, I would like to see a usual care control in clinical trials, and I would like to see some greater focus on alternatives to transplant, which that is restorative treatments. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening to all that we've had to say.
Thank you. Doreen Fluke. Doreen?
Hi, I'm Doreen Fluke. I'm from Michigan, and I'm here to talk not only for myself, but for the people that I speak to in the state of Michigan. There's folks out there that desperately want to participate, and there's not a lot of clinical trials near us that they can go to. Travel is an issue. Finance is an issue. The medicine is an issue. Oxygen is an issue. They want to give more, and they're out there and they're hungry. Being in Michigan and having the winters and needing to go seek that care, it's very tough. If you don't have an automatic start, let your car warm up, scrape your windows. That's all you can do. You have to go back and sit down for 20 minutes. It's a tough way to go, and they're up there and they want that help. Whatever you can do, whatever decisions are out there, any new advances, it would be appreciated from all. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Jeffries.
Hello, everyone. My name's Andrew. I'm the nephew of Gordon and Ruth Cadugan.
I just wanted to speak on two things here. I know the FDA, I was looking up here, it says talking about protecting and promoting public health. And so I just wanted to try to give a little bit of feedback to about what you guys can actually do from my understanding. And I think first thing is quality of life and helping patients who are suffering to make their, to give them the quality of life. If you're, like with me, I'm deaf myself, and I was provided with 2 interpreters to help me understand clearly when I wasn't, if I missed something, they would clarify for me. And I think it's the same thing with Alpha. It's just, I think, across the board, maybe through policy, but including ideas to help bring awareness to workers. I mean, I think one gentleman talked about here about coming in, he had to use it, put his inhaler into a box that had stuff growing in it and all the germs from that. And just raising more awareness in that sense to help quality of life, and with promoting public health, I think that fits hand in hand with you guys. And the other, and I just wanted to end on this note too, with this being a rare disease, I find the term rare, with me being deaf, it's obviously, not every day you meet a deaf person, and it's not every day you meet a person with Alpha, unless you're at this event, obviously. But my pastor once told me that every number has a name, every name has a story, and I believe that is thorough with Alpha. And even to build on top of that, every story is affecting more than one person. So you might have one person with the disease, but it affects the whole family. And with my uncle having it, it's affecting my own life too. So, thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Price. No, Chuck? Okay. Richard Lovrick.
Hello, everybody. My family. My name is Richard Lovrick. I'm 60 years old. Number one, I'd like to know why it took until just 2.5 years ago for me to be diagnosed with Alpha-1. I've been hospitalized for breathing. I have, after an operation for peritonitis, for my burst appendix and peritonitis, I couldn't breathe for a few weeks at all very well, and I wasn't even tested then. So how can it be that a person goes to a physician and is not receiving any significant help from the medications they're taking, and they do not automatically test for that? I think if you came in not breathing at all, they would automatically recommend burial. So I think we deserve a break. So it doesn't seem like a big education leap. I'm on the same medications that you're all on. I'm on Zimera and steroids and rescue inhalers and antibiotics. And I have to say, for that cocktail, it seems to be working rather well. I echo everything that everyone says about their treatments. Note, why are there warnings for addiction risk to the label for OxyContin when there are no warnings on prednisone for users to avoid their spouses, work, Fox News, or just anything annoying? How is that possible? I wonder about that. You know, health is so much more than just treatment. Health is so much more than medication. My doctor finally acquiesced, and I'm on oxygen for sleeping, and that's helped a great deal after being tested. But why did I have to find out for myself that oxygen has transformed my life when it comes to exercise? It's transformed my life when it comes to yard work, to exertion, to sex. Thank you. Who brought up sex before? That was so brave. I'm sorry. Are there any children left? Cunnilingus. Just try that. It's really good. Sorry. So I'm going to go out on a limb. Why are alphas so strong? Look at this room of strong people, and all of these strong people tuned in today. I have a theory. In 2014, our nation was horrified at the story of poor Eric Garner. I can't breathe. Why did those words strike such a note in America, across the world, T-shirts, buttons. I can't breathe. Everyone in this room has overcome that fear and has to overcome that fear on a daily basis. And I think that's why you're so strong. And I applaud you all. Can you give yourselves an applause? Thanks. For all the alphas here at home today and for all the alphas that are undiagnosed and therefore suffering doubly, I say, while we're all struggling to breathe, we will all continue fighting for every breath. I thank the Foundation, its brave leaders, and the FDA for this amazing experience today. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Katie Ferris.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Ferris. I'm glad to be here. My son was diagnosed with alpha-1 when he was 2.5 as a result of having a swollen liver. We believe it was with a virus. We're not sure what the virus was. They were guessing possibly Epstein-Barr. But through a series of blood work, when his liver enzymes never decreased to a normal level, his doctor thankfully kept pressing and tested him for alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. He has the ZZ gene. When we discovered that, we tested our whole family and found out that of our other children, we have 4 children, 3 of them total are also ZZ. I'm very thankful for an early diagnosis. So I echo all of the advocates for early testing. That has made a significant difference, I believe, for our family already. We have not experienced many of the side effects, and we haven't needed some of the medications that have been discussed today, but my understanding in coming here is that you want to hear what life is like for families with alpha, and as a caregiver for 3 children with alpha, some of what I experienced might not fit some of the questions that were asked today. But for me, I am now giving medication on a daily basis to all my children. I line up their medicine cups. They all have inhalers. They're all diagnosed with asthma. So just on a regular day, morning, I'm giving medication on a regular basis. When anyone gets sick, it's easy for all of them to get sick. And our house turns into just a medical zone. I have times when all of them are on nebulizers and I'm giving treatments throughout the day. One of my sons had pneumonia twice this year, so he was on prednisone. And so I go into prevention mode. What can I do to prevent my son's infection from getting worse? Doctor's appointments for our family. Our children see a number of specialists. We see 5 specialists, I believe, on a regular basis. Between our children, maybe it's 4, but we've seen other specialists for specific needs along the way. Another issue that we have encountered besides the asthma is that some of our children have coexisting conditions. So we have questions. Are those related to alpha-1? We do not know because that research hasn't necessarily been done. Our daughter is diagnosed with 3 rare diseases. I don't know how they interplay with each other. The diseases would be alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. She also is diagnosed with something called FPIES, which is a rare food allergy where she has a GI response to particular foods. And then she's also diagnosed with ketotic hypoglycemia. So we have to make sure that she's getting food on a regular basis. She's been hospitalized twice for that this year. And so when I'm in the hospital with her, I have to make sure that the nurses are giving her other medications appropriately. And a challenge for me has been having multiple specialists who are very good in their field, but don't necessarily know how everything interacts with each other, and maybe aren't studied in alpha-1 to know how that affects the big picture of their lives. So as a parent, I'm thankful for an early diagnosis. I would desire that for other families as well. My focus is prevention for my children, particularly as we move forward, and I appreciate your desire to listen to our conversation. And again, I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have, but thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And our last speaker will be Lisa Kosak.
Gosh, I'm getting picked on and I haven't even started. I was lucky enough to have National Jewish Hospital in Denver, kind of in my backyard. I grew up in Minneapolis. I moved to Vail, Colorado, just a little west of Vail, in 1996. And at 40, I was still pitching softball, running the bases, kept getting slower and slower. That home run turned into a double, into a single, because I didn't want to run around the base. At first, I thought it was my heart. Went in for the heart catheterization, and it was sleep apnea. They sent me to National Jewish Hospital for a sleep test. 2 days of testing, lo and behold. At that point, I was on oxygen 24/7. And telling me, you're going to have augmentation therapy for the rest of your life. I'm like, I don't do needles. I hadn't done a prescription since 1994. It was a prenatal vitamin. I just don't get sick, or I didn't get sick. So with that, after I owned 2 businesses, I had 2 kids, very active in the community. I was on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce, HOA board, every charity in Eagle County. Well, with being on oxygen 24/7, living at 8,000 feet, not conducive. Put my house on the market, hired a great general manager, and took early retirement to Vero Beach, Florida. How it affected my family even more, my oldest son, who's 24 now, started his senior year. My youngest, who's 21, started his freshman year in a school where they knew nobody. And they've been very supportive. At one point, I didn't think I would see them through high school. They both graduated from college. One's in University of Texas in Austin, working on his master's. There is hope. There's a lot of things. I was fortunate to have Jenny Fowle as my AlphaNet coordinator in Florida, and eventually I became an AlphaNet coordinator. I'm starting my 3rd clinical trial. One of the great things about clinical trials, you get great workups from great doctors that know stuff about us. So they can look for things, our normal doctors can't. So I highly recommend that. But the biggest thing for me would have been if my kids were tested as infants, because they would have come up as MZs, and then it would have been suggested that people got tested. Never would have had the lung damage. I would have probably wouldn't have moved to Colorado. I would have stayed in Minneapolis because there was no oxygen at 8,000 feet. So that's what brought me here. Thanks to Jenny, I got involved, and I'll be involved. I want my kids and my grandkids, I don't have them yet, to have a better shot at this than I did. So it's on you guys. Help us out. Thank you.
Lisa. Thanks to all of our speakers. I'll turn the program back to Donna now.
Well, I think you guys can give yourselves a big round of applause. Chris? And with that, for closing remarks, I turn it back over to Dr. Michaud.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a personal reflection. I'm really struck by the solidarity among the members of this community and the support that you give one another. It's truly admirable and something that I think is leaving a mark. We've had a very good day today. I think my FDA colleagues will agree that this has been an important meeting. We thank you for your participation because that is what made this a success. The information that you've shared with us will help us in our interactions with manufacturers and investigators to facilitate the development of new drugs and for the design of new clinical trials. What we've learned today will help ensure that the way that we measure benefits of new drugs in clinical trials are measures that matter most to patients. The information that we heard today, your input, will also be useful to manufacturers of new therapies. I want to touch on a few points before I close the meeting. I can't recap all that we've heard today. This meeting was very rich with information, and we will be poring over the transcript to make sure that we've captured everything. What I heard was a resounding call for a cure for this life-altering disorder. There is a need for research that will lead to new and innovative therapies, improvements in the therapies that exist today, whether in terms of the delivery of the drugs, different dosing, and I also heard a call for earlier treatment, and that's something that may be reflected in clinical trials in the future. We also heard about many of the challenges you face with current therapies. One example is oxygen therapy and all the challenges that that poses whenever you leave your home. Also in terms of availability, as we heard in some comments. We've certainly heard that there is a paucity of therapies for those affected with liver disease. Variable responses to the therapies that exist today, and a call for faster drug approval, accelerated development of therapies. I think that was heard by all of us. You talked about the huge burden of lung and liver disease on patients and on their families, and how that translates into demands on your caregivers and the full impact of this disease on your families. You talked about the profound challenges of shortness of breath, how life-limiting the lung symptoms or the pulmonary symptoms are, and we also heard about the rapidity with which liver disease can progress and the life-threatening complications of liver disease. One person put it best by saying that the impacts of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency can be summed up as a life never fully realized. And that, I think, sums it up quite well. On another theme, we heard a lot about late diagnosis and misdiagnosis and your many experiences with the healthcare system, some of which were obviously quite distressing. We heard your concerns about a lack of education within the medical community about this disorder, and the fear of being hospitalized because you get sicker in the hospital, as one person put it. It's very clear that this is a well-educated community, very proactive in supporting research, and this is a community that seeks to have a voice in study design, and where individuals are very motivated to becoming enrolled in clinical studies. The Alpha-1 Foundation has spoken about the advocacy that it performs for patients in terms of study designs, the use of biomarkers, the use of patient-reported outcomes, and also talking about what's acceptable to patients in terms of the use of placebo arms, for example, or other factors that may be involved in these clinical studies. Just to close then, I want to thank you very much for being here or for joining us online. Your participation was essential to making this a success. We've learned a great deal from you today, and we're very grateful for that. If you have more information you'd like to share with us, please send us your comments on the docket, and we will be reviewing all of these comments. Thank you also to my colleagues for organizing this meeting, and to the Alpha One Foundation for your support and your help in making today a very productive meeting. And finally, on behalf of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, I thank you for your time. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Nothing's working out. Thank you very much.